everyone. Welcome to this broadcast here tonight. I know we're having some technical difficulties, but thank you for joining us. This is Rewriting My Story with Dr. Mondo. And, there's going to every once in a while be some difficulties getting the technology to work in our favor. But we are not going to stop tonight. We're going to make sure that we get this broadcast going. And as soon as we get Chef AJ on here, and I think she can hear us, everything's good. It's just we're having an issue connecting her to the broadcast, but the moment that we're able to kind of figure that out, we will get this thing going, and I'll tell you more about Chef AJ here in a moment, just as we are waiting to get her on camera. So just one more moment as we let technology work itself out. And here we go. Look at that.
Oh no, I'm trying to make it.
Look at that. I'll tell you what,
Okay.
You know what? Sometimes you have to work hard to get this technology to work for you, but this is the joy. People want to see this. And speaking of what people want to see, they want to see this stuff here too. Of course, everyone's all about the before and after pictures. And what we're here about today is to talk about the story behind the before and after pictures. Chef AJ, so excited to have you here tonight on Rewriting My Story with Dr. Mondo. I'm just, one of the things I got to ask you right off the bat is looking at these photos. I'm going to get settled in here in a second. And I know you're getting settled in too.
I know, I'm trying to get this to, Charles, can you help me? No, it's from my phone. There we go.
Thank you, Charles. That's great. No, that's great. Oh yeah, there we go. Look at that. This is a side by side. See, this is living proof that what Chef AJ's recipes can do for you. Chef AJ, when you look at those pictures there on screen, I'm not sure if you could see them or not, the before and after pictures. Yeah. What kind of goes through your mind? I'm gonna join you here on camera, but these pictures go back how far now?
Oh my gosh, let's see. The one on the left was September 1st, 1987, when I was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Wow, September 1st, 19. You know the date and everything. Yeah, wow, 1987.
God, the middle one was about 1990. I remember I was on another TV show. That's weird. But the one on the right was not that long ago. That was 2011. That's not too long ago. That was 7 years.
Yeah, and then these pictures here that people can see now here, the bottom three.
Those were taken a couple of months ago for my new book that's coming out next month. So yeah, those are real shorts, by the way. When I weighed almost 200 pounds, those shorts on the left, those were my shorts. Wow. I didn't keep any of my fat clothes except for that one pair of shorts, which are actually Scooby-Doo shorts. I had them on backwards, but they have Scooby-Doo on the front.
So what's it like for you? I'm going to jump on the screen, but what's it like for you to look at those pictures? Yeah,
it makes me feel happy, proud, and empowered, because I know that if I can do it, I know what I did, and I can teach other people to do it. It's not rocket science. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's actually doable. Once I learned how to do it from the doctors at True North, where I now work, I mean, it's really not rocket science. And it's not like I had some magical charmed life or gastric bypass surgery or plastic surgery. It really is calorie density, which is something I learned at True North, and that's what I teach now. And when you get the food right, it really is that easy.
Wow. Wow. And now tell people more about True North. They're probably hearing you mention that. Where's True North?
So True North is actually it's like the best kept secret. I didn't know about it until about
I didn't know about it either. Yeah,
it's so cool. So it's in Santa Rosa, California, and Dr. Alan Goldhammer and his wife, Dr. Jennifer Morano, founded it about 32 years ago. And it's actually a medically supervised therapeutic water-only fasting center. But you don't have to fast on water. You can. And really, the reason people fast on water, Dr. Mondo, is not for weight loss, not at all. They do it to recover from things like autoimmune disease and heart disease and diabetes and things like that. It just happens to work really wonderful for food addiction, because what it does is it resets your palate so that healthy food actually tastes delicious. So I went there in January of 2011, not even to lose weight. I was 50 pounds heavier. I was 165 pounds. I went there because I was on psychiatric medication and I could not get off of it. And that's why I went there, but they couldn't fast me because they didn't fast people on psych meds. They didn't know what the outcome would be. So they let me do a juice fast, which is not as powerful as a water fast. But really what I learned there about food, I had been vegan already since 1977, but I was a fat vegan. I just was not eating the right diet to sustain optimal health or weight loss. And
what kind of stuff what kind of stuff were you eating at the time? Because I'm sure people probably wonder when you say that. Yeah.
Oh, I had a wonderful diet. Let's see. My breakfast was Coke Slurpees. I loved
Coke Slurpees. Those are vegan, right? People don't talk about
that.
Those are vegan.
And I would add 8 extra pumps of vanilla syrup. I loved Coke Slurpees. Hi, Sharon. I see Sharon's on there. Our mutual
awesome. Yes, Sharon's our connection.
Pepper.
Yeah.
Dr. Pepper for lunch. That, Dee was my favorite doctor. Big gulp, 48 ounce. And I would eat candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream all day. They were vegan, but they weren't healthy. It was sugar and flour and oil and caffeine. And I didn't really eat a single fruit or vegetable until I was 43 years old, which was about 15 years ago.
Wow.
So hence I ended up close to 200 pounds with the beginning of colon cancer. So when I learned what to eat, then it actually, there was an adjustment. I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy. You don't go from eating, like all your calories from sugar and then all your calories from kale overnight. There is some transition, but once you do it, it really, I think to sustain it is actually easier than you would think once you get over the detoxification withdrawal from all the crap food that at least that I was eating, and which I would say most Americans probably are eating.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, and that's, so your book, Unprocessed, I think I want to touch on that. I want to start with where you're at today. We'll work our way backwards to the beginning part, but I want people to really know just how amazing it is to have you here, because I know that for me, 4.5 months into Whole Foods plant-based journey, thanks to my coach Sharon McRae, that really that I think there's so much of this community that comes together and just starts to motivate and inspire you. You are certainly one of the people that motivate and inspire me. So it's a great joy to have you on here. But so if people are just checking this out and they're not sure who Chef AJ is, and they've been living under a potato or a rock, then what to tell people right off the bat is about your book Unprocessed, and tell them a little bit more about ultimate weight loss.
Sure. So I could actually go grab a copy. So about 7 years ago, I wrote a book called Unprocessed, which is basically a cookbook, has a little bit of the story of my life in it. Actually, the best way, if people really want to know about me, there's a YouTube video that I did at Dr. John McDougall's Advanced Study Weekend called From Fat Vegan to Skinny Bitch. If you put that in the YouTube search box, that's really the entire story of my life. It's about 45 minutes long. But I wrote this book Unprocessed because the premise that I was trying to teach people is that whether you're vegan or not, we're still not supposed to eat processed food, things from a can, a box, a bottle, or a bag. And so I really believe that. That's what Jack LaLanne had been saying his whole life. If God made it, eat it. If man made it, don't eat it. And so I had over 100 recipes, and they were a little bit richer than the way I eat today. They had things like cocoa powder in them, and there was some nuts and peanut butter and some richer plant-based foods, but they were free of sugar, oil, and salt and flour. And they're pretty good recipes, most of them. And so I wrote this book, and it did pretty well. I mean, not a New York Times bestseller, but it's been doing pretty good. And I've been touring for the last 7 years at conferences, hospitals, veg fest, things like that, cruise ships, spas, teaching cooking, because I am a chef. I went to culinary school, and teaching cooking, and also talking about the miracles just in general associated with plant-based eating, even before weight loss was in the picture. So I was still heavy, up until about 6 years ago when I didn't start the Ultimate Weight Loss Program then, because I didn't have a program. I was doing what I was taught at True North, and then it actually became a program that people can join where I can support them in losing weight this way, which is the diet that Sharon is on. I mean, Sharon is, your coach is not overweight. She's not a food addict. She just happens to eat the healthiest diet on the planet for health reasons, which happens to be the most beautiful, perfect diet for weight loss. So it's perfect. You know, it's not like we need one diet for cancer and one diet for heart disease and one diet for diabetes or autoimmune disease or weight loss.
Right,
it's
right.
really close to being the same diet. Of course, there are people like children and males that can have a little bit more fat if they want, you know, from the nuts and the seeds and the avocado and the tahini, but it's basically the same diet. Oh, I see Adam's on. Hi, Adam. It's a whole food, plant-based diet.
Get the whole community.
And there's no processed food, and sugar and oil and flour, these are processed foods. So it's quite different than what most people are eating and what most people grew up with. But when you neuroadapt, when you get used to eating the healthy food, it actually tastes really, really good. And it's quite sustainable. It's very filling. You get to eat more in terms of volume, more calories, not more calories, but more volume for fewer calories. So if your goal is weight loss, you'll achieve it. And if your goal is weight maintenance, you'll still be fine. You're not, it's, you know, people think like, oh, what if you lose too much weight? It's not like on any diet, you don't just lose to zero. You know, your body gets to a point where, I mean, you know, where it maintains. And what's interesting is a lot of people say, well, everybody's telling me I'm too thin. That means you're just right in this country. When you start hearing you're too thin, you're probably just right.
Because so much of what our understanding of the set point is maybe off, is what you're saying, yeah?
Well, also, you know, they say that our worldview of what is normal is what we see around us. And since one out of every four people, only one out of every four people right now is not overweight or obese. So there are more overweight or obese people now than slender or normal weight people. So when you see somebody that's slender or normal weight, especially if they had been heavy before, the only possible explanation is they have cancer or they're sick, because almost no one can lose weight and keep it off more than 2 years. So that's part of the reason. And part of it could be jealousy or status, you know, especially if the person is still heavy themselves. But what I'm trying to say, especially to my female clients, is that when people start telling you you're too thin, you know that you're probably just perfect.
That's when you've hit the magic bar. I love that. You don't go back to that. Well, would you say you don't go back to zero, right? Like that.
Well, no, I mean, people say, oh my God, are you going to keep losing weight? No, I mean, obviously there's a
because you're eating. Yeah. I mean, and people get the book, because you'll see the recipes and, you know,
God. I have a show called Weight Loss Wednesday that I do every Wednesday live, like you're doing on my page, Chef AJ, at 4:00. And there's now 60 episodes. And I believe it's episode 36 where I show what I eat in a day. And it's about 10 pounds of food. And that's
10
a
pounds.
lot of food.
Holy, yeah.
And you know, most people eat between 3 and 5 pounds, but because I eat food so low in caloric density, like salads and vegetables and fruit, I get to eat more food. And so that's what's really exciting, because most diet styles have you eat less food or weigh and measure your food, and you're eating these skimpy portions. When you understand calorie density, which is the foundation of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program and the dietary style taught at True North and at the McDougall program, you can eat much larger quantities of food. Like, you know, Linda Middlesworth, who you interviewed, she eats like, I mean, I forget how many potatoes, like 20 potatoes a day. It's amazing. Yeah,
20, no way. 20 potatoes a day. Wow.
I eat about 3 pounds of potatoes a day, but it's not that much. You know, Sharon says she eats a lot, and so do I. People make comments all the time. Yeah, because if you're eating what most Americans eat, which is 92% of their calories from animal products and processed food, you're eating food that's very high in fat and high in caloric density. So you don't get to eat that much in volume.
Right.
You know, I wish I knew you were going to ask me this, because I could just, I could grab some props, because I got to get this. I'm sorry.
Go get it. This is live. This is what real time Facebook stuff looks like. And this is what people want. Go grab your props. Yeah. Let's see what you got.
All right. So I'm just going to get these props, because I actually was on a plane yesterday coming home from Florida.
Awesome. What were you doing? What were you doing in Florida?
I was speaking at the Veg Fest.
Oh, that's right. That's what you told me.
And so, you know, I even if you don't want it, they give you snacks on the plane, you know?
Always.
So it was not a connecting flight. So I got, let's see, I got these little 100-calorie bags, 1, 2, 3. And then I got 4, I got 1, 2, look at all this crap I got. I got 300-calorie bags.
What are those?
Peanuts, and these are 100 calories each, because let's see, each one is a half an ounce. So 200. Okay, so this is 400. This is 700 calories of food right here in my
700
bag,
right there. How many? Yeah. So I know what you're setting up here. I want to see this. So this is crazy.
This is not that much food.
No.
Would you agree that this is not that much food?
I could crush those.
Right,
And
I could literally crush this. This is,
yeah,
and this isn't all
literally.
they gave me, by the way, because they gave me 2 of these, which is another 400 calories, and then the pretzels. But right here in my hand, right here, I'm holding, and I have small hands, by the way, 700 calories of food.
Wow.
Now, so what did I have for lunch and breakfast today? So for breakfast, I had 2 pounds of zucchini. That's about 67. That's about 150 calories.
What's 2 pounds of zucchini look like? I mean, again, I can't visualize that. Is that like? How many zucchinis is that?
Okay, so it was.
I guess they all vary in size.
They were. Yeah. It was 3 fairly medium large zucchinis, but I cooked it in the air fryer, which means that it got rid of a lot of the water. It was about 2 cups of food. It wasn't very much. So I had 2 pounds of zucchini, and then I had about a 2-pound salad with arugula and cabbage and an oil-free lovely vinaigrette dressing. Man. And I had rice in it. I had my starch. So this huge meal, and by the way, people saw me eat it at the Veg Fest. It was a huge amount of food that took me a long time to eat, was 650 calories. This is 700 calories. This is all fat. This is no fiber. There's no nutrients. And then if I had known we were going to talk about this, I mean, I had like literally a trough. And I was full for like probably 5 hours. And you can't get full on processed food and animal products because there's no fiber, there's no water, there's no nutrients. It's shocking to people to understand that you actually can eat more and weigh less and lose weight when you understand calorie density. But think about it. Vegetables have 100 calories a pound. Oil has 4,000 calories a pound. It's
4,000. Unbelievable.
So for the same amount of calories in my 2 pounds of zucchini, somebody else is eating 1 tablespoon of olive oil. That's nothing.
That's nothing. And so what you're saying is all calories are not created equal.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, and I want to talk about your story, but people need to hear this information. Again, there is a way to still eat a lot of food. There's a way to actually remove a lot of your boundaries and limits, right? As long as you know what your lanes are and still be satisfied and actually be more satiated than you ever have been. And that demonstration right there shows you how it's possible.
Well, here's the thing. It's interesting you brought one of my favorite words, satiation.
Yeah.
We have what's known as the mechanisms of satiation. We have the stretch receptors, the nutrient receptors, and the calorie receptors. They line our digestive tracts. And if your viewers want more precise information on this, the book I would recommend is called The Pleasure Trap by
100%. Yep. Yep. We'll put a link in there.
She'd probably be a great interview for you.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Animal products and processed food, which Americans eat over 92% of their calories from, have no fiber and no water. And it's the fiber in the plant food and the water together that creates what's known as bulk. And bulk is what creates satiety. So it's impossible to feel full on animal products and processed food unless you grossly overeat on them, and by then exceeding your calorie budget, because without fiber you'll never experience fullness. And that's the biggest problem with animal products and processed food, is that lack of fiber. You know, fiber is important to every bodily process. It flushes out toxins, it prevents certain cancers like colon cancer, it binds to cholesterol and other waste material. So fiber is important for those reasons. But where weight loss is concerned and where satiety is concerned, it is the key to the kingdom. You want to make sure that everything you eat, even if you're not vegan or vegetarian, you want to make sure that at least almost everything you eat has the fiber intact, and that half your plate at every meal, even breakfast, half your plate at least is vegetables. And that really is the #1 secret to weight loss. Americans eat less than 10% of their calories from fruits and vegetables. Most Americans less than 3% from vegetables, and some are eating no vegetables. I know that until I was 43 years old, I didn't eat a single fruit and vegetable. So I'm not judging anybody or making them feel bad. Listen, I'm passionate about this because I got fat and sick and I did everything wrong. Vegetables are really, whatever the question, kale is pretty much the answer. That is what's going to make you lean. And what people don't know, and I didn't know this either, is that there's compounds in vegetables, particularly the dark green leafy ones like the greens that people don't like, that actually fight cravings for all the crap that people want to eat, like the sugary, floury, oily treats. Something called phycaloids, THYKAL, lots of stuff I found in the medical research. And so if you eat vegetables, especially early in the day, you are turning off your hunger switch for all this other crap. But it's really hard because, you know why? Because to most people, they don't taste good. Because of their low caloric density, they produce less dopamine. So the reason we like this stuff is these high calorie, high fat foods produce more dopamine because they are higher calorie. All eating stimulates this neurotransmitter that's produced in the brain called dopamine.
We're dope fiends.
Right, we're dopamine addicts, but foods of higher caloric density produce more dopamine. So of course we like chocolate and cheese and sugar more than we like, potatoes, rice, and beans, because even though they produce dopamine, they produce less. And once Dr. Goldhammer explained that to me, and I realized that, like you said, I was a dopamine addict. I was eating to medicate more than I was eating to satiate. There was some detoxification withdrawal, but then when I realized I could eat a lot of this, or let me show you something. This is hilarious. So I've been running programs for about 10 years now. And one of the things we used to do is we'd have people make a pledge not to eat any of these processed foods or animal products for like 21 or 30 days, depending on the program. And they would have to bring the crap to my house to the meeting, and we'd have like a fake bonfire. We didn't really have a fire in my living room, but the idea was they would put it away. Well, 2008, that's 10 years ago, somebody brought this to my house. Now this is like a Cinnabon type bun, but the kind you get from 7-Eleven, right? Now, there's no expiration date on here. You know why? Because it never expires.
Because it's like space food. What is it? What is it?
10 years. It's 10 years old, and it's still perfectly fine. Listen to this.
It's like a Big Mac.
One serving. This one Cinnabon type product, 4.75 ounces. Is 690 calories, 440 grams of fat, 49 grams of fat, 30 grams saturated fat. Ooh, no cholesterol. That's good. Tons of sodium. You know how much fiber? 1 gram of fiber. But the point is for this 700 calories, oh my God, I could have 2 pounds of potatoes or sweet potatoes. 2 pounds. That's a lot of food. What's going to fill me up more? But yet people think nothing of going to Costco or the donut shop and having maybe not even one, but maybe 2 of these, right?
Right.
So my biggest message at the end of the day is that processed food isn't food, and we need to eat more fruits and vegetables. And the more you eat the healthy food, the better you're going to feel, the thinner you're going to be, and the less you eat this. Hopefully people will eventually eliminate this and most animal products, if not all animal products. But this is crazy. 10 years old, and look at that. It's like, the frosting has chipped a little, but it's still, I guess, edible for the people that eat this. It's crazy, huh?
Well, and the good thing is that that's going to be a display you could use for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And with the way you eat, you'll be living beyond probably that even. And that will always be a display that's ready for you. So that's why it's got no expiration date. It's an endless display for the rest of your life.
This will probably outlive me, seriously.
Like we said, the Big Macs, McDonald's stuff we've seen. So again, people I know want to know about this stuff. They want to know, again, more. Get the book Unprocessed. Definitely get that. It's a must read. Check out Weight Loss Wednesdays. As you can see, Chef AJ is full of information. The kids say facts. You're dropping facts, you're dropping knowledge, and there's more and more to come every time that you tune into her broadcast. Chef AJ, I want to talk to you though too. You keep saying before the previous 43 years, and I'm wondering. We talk about rewriting your story, and it's so obvious that you have rewritten your story just because of who you are. But what are some things that people would be like if we took somehow like a camera back and we were watching life, all the way back to maybe that first photo around that time. How was life different, prior to even starting the beginning of your weight loss journey?
Wow. It was so different. I wasn't married, I didn't really date because, it's funny because I grew up at a time where very few people were overweight or obese. I was born in 1960, and now it's more social, I guess the word is socially acceptable, or it is. More people are overweight now, so you don't really stick out like you do, like I did in 1960. In 1960, there was only one fat kid in every class, and that was me, at least all the way through high school. And so even though I wasn't bullied or teased like the way kids sometimes are today, PE was very hard for me, physical education. The teachers were really mean. I couldn't do the things that you were required to do in physical education. Like we had these rope walls we had to climb, balance beams. When you're fat, you can't do that, and you can't run very fast. And that's where the humiliation was really in physical education class. And I remember when I was in about, I'm going to say like 9th or 10th grade, there were budget cuts in California, and the governor said there was no more physical education in the state of California because it used to be mandatory. I mean,
Yeah.
I cried tears of joy because all my humiliation was from, and then you grow up absolutely hating exercise and hating your body when you're being shamed like that,
It's associated with so much of that trauma. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I remember when I think I was 11 years old, and my uncle, I lived with an aunt and uncle in California, and they were trying to teach me to ski. And so I was like, I fell. I couldn't get up. And like, I remember people laughing, like that old joke, falling and I can't get up, and I couldn't. So those were some of the bad memories. I wasn't being teased unmercifully and being called like horrible names like some people probably are. But I mean, it was enough to, to traumatize me. And I remember, like when you're heavy, your thighs rub together, and you had to wear shorts at physical education. And I remember those abrasions and things like that. So I just remember, I try to block out a lot of it. I try not to remember like, too much bad stuff, but having just written a book about the story of my life, some of that has come back. So yeah, it was good, and the thing is, there's an old a song by Linda Ronstadt called Tracks in My Tears, where she says, people say I'm the life of the party because I tell a joke or two, but if you look down deep inside, you'll see that I am really blue.
Wow.
So I deflected all the pain by being the class clown. And I was
going to ask you that.
Funny. Yeah. So what I used to want to be as a comedian. I actually was on the Tonight Show. If your viewers go to YouTube and put in Nose Flute Girl, they'll see me quite heavy on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So I was very funny.
Amazing.
And I was a very good student. So I was teacher's pet. So I didn't have a lot of the same kind of maybe shame and humiliation that maybe somebody that was more of a wallflower would have, because I you make fun of yourself because then they can't make fun of you kind of thing.
Right.
So it wasn't like school was horrible, but I didn't get asked to my senior prom, and that is, for a girl, that's devastating. I had to ask a friend to go, and it was a guy friend, and but that's stuff you don't forget. And that's why I'm so passionate with people with children. I think about the Willie Nelson song, Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. I want to say, mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be fat girls, because we have a pediatrician here named Jay Gordon, and he says a fat kid never has a good day at school. And, that's why I'm so passionate about not feeding this kind of stuff to your kids, because you don't realize how hard it is socially for them, especially the girls, when they're overweight. It's not good, because your self-esteem and your weight are intimately connected, especially for a girl. And it's so much. I mean, I wish I could go back in time now, because, I look good now, and it's like, I'd love to say to all those people that dissed me, it's like, this is what you missed.
Right. And
and
the truth is that there's parts of you, I mean, there's a large part of you, if not the majority of your personality and such, that is still the same today, that in this thinner body than it was then. Do you find though that, like, what was there a turning point for you where you were you ever able to find a way to truly like have self-confidence and self-esteem and self-worth like you have now, but before you had actually lost the weight, or did that only come when you lost the weight?
No, I mean, I think in certain areas, I think and certainly not in my appearance before I lost weight, because it just seems, and again, I'm not a guy, but it just seems with guys, the figure is almost even more important than having a pretty face. You hear that all the time. Oh, you have such a pretty face, if only you'd lose weight. But I did have self-esteem in areas because I was smart. I mean, I went to an Ivy League school. I was proud of my academic accomplishments and things like that. But I think at the end of the day, all women want to be thin, or they're lying. And if they say they don't, they've never been thin. It is very empowering to be able to be thin in a way that was so healthy, that because I had been thin twice before in my life. I had anorexia in my teens, and I went on fen in my 30s, and both of those were very short-lived. But the fact that I could lose weight and keep it off for 6 years, and do it so by eating large amounts of healthy food, and teach other people to do this. See, to me, that's where the self-esteem comes in, the empowerment, not because I have a slim figure, because you can get a slim figure simply by, doing cocaine or chemotherapy. Right. So I think that's kind of cool. And also the other thing that is kind of neat, and I didn't realize this until I started working with Dr. Doug Lyle, who's also a psychologist, is that one way we can increase our self-esteem at any weight is by exercising. And I never exercised, because as I mentioned, all the shame and humiliation came from the
associated with that. Yeah.
But I started exercising about 5 years ago regularly, not so much to lose weight, because I lost the weight without it, but just to manage my anxiety. And there is something very self-esteem building when you have a regular exercise practice, that when you get up in the morning, whether you want to or not, and do something, whether it's go to the gym or take a walk and do yoga. So these are things that people can do. You don't have to have that slim body yet. I mean, at any weight, there's always something you can do, whether it's walking in the shallow end of a swimming pool, because those are things to increase your self-esteem. And so I never realized how important it was until I started listening to the Beat Your Genes podcast by Dr. Lyle. And apparently self-esteem is pretty important to human beings. And there's ways we can get it. And losing weight is one of them, but there's other ways we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and like you said too, I think how you pointed that out, that things have changed, but I think, that's probably something that there's a point of connection. While things have changed today versus, 20, 30 years ago, at the same time, we've increasingly live in a weight shaming society where we really, a large part of our identity is formed around how we look or formed around our appearance. Do you feel like, looking back, like that was a part of you that overshadowed all those good parts? Like people will often say to me, like, I was the top of my class. I was, a high achiever. I was a really good parent. But at the end of the day, the fact that I couldn't get my health under control, like that plagued me in a way where I would never allow myself to really be confident, or I would never really allow myself to have positive self-talk. It was like always dominated by that one aspect of me. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, look at Oprah. She's one of the richest women in the world, and yet this is one problem she hasn't solved,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with how rich you are or how smart you are. It's hard. Let me tell you, it's really hard. If you're not one of these genetically blessed thin people to be able to, maintain a healthy body weight on a daily basis, it does take some effort. And if you know anything about the pleasure trap, all the forces are working against us to not be slender and not be healthy. I mean, like I say, everywhere you go, there's a machine that for, $1 or whatever, 50 cents pops this out. We're living in a very unnatural food environment. It's not how we evolved. It's not how our ancestors or how our brains evolved. The food that is being served, especially to children now, you almost don't have a chance to be slender or healthy in the world today if you eat the food that most people eat. So it's a tough battle. It really is. And I hear every day how hard it is for people, especially because a lot of them want to get healthy, but they're living with people that don't. And that makes it even harder.
Yeah. And so what do you say, I guess, to those people from a standpoint of from your own experience and what you do and being an expert, not just, culinary expert, but an expert in, in whole foods, plant-based, an expert in having gone through this yourself? What do you say, like when you see someone that goes into your program and they have all these different spinning plates of stuff that's impacting them? And I know, like we talked about yesterday on our pre-call, just like it's easy to make excuses, right? And let those things be the reasons that get in our way of making a health transformation. But when you look at someone that has marital problems, or you look at someone that is struggling with depression and anxiety, what's the best approach? Is it this idea that if we just focus on the food, it will be enough to get the positive momentum going so those other things can be sorted out? Or do you need that conjunctive piece where you're doing some sort of therapy in addition to that? Like, what, in your experience, what do you think is the most effective?
That's tough, because I think the answer, I don't think you can paint everyone with the same brush.
You can't, yeah.
Different for everybody. I think it really depends on the why and how motivated they are. So for example, I think if somebody's having marital problems or job stress or had previous trauma, I'm a big fan of therapy for everyone in the world. I think everybody needs it. I very few people don't need to talk to somebody, whether it's a psychologist or a pastor or a minister or a rabbi. So I'm
agree.
A huge fan. I talk to my psychologist almost every week, and I think it keeps you healthy and sane. And so that said, you can still have marital problems and eat vegetables. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to, because it's a lot of times, and I'm not saying they use it as an excuse. I really believe they have these problems, but I always think of the saying, the road to someday leads to never. And if you wait for that magical moment in your life where everything's perfect, where the kids have graduated and they're out of the house, and it's never going to happen. And so at some point you got to say, look, yeah, it's hard, but I'm just going to do it. We have a girl in the program that she's not in the army, but she works for the government in Afghanistan. But I think she's called a contractor, and she can't even get vegetables half the time. And if they do, it's like frozen lettuce. And she gave a testimonial we just sent out to our mailing list where she said, I call bullshit on all you people that say you can't do it, because she's literally in the hardest circumstances for somebody trying to do a health promoting diet, and yet she's doing it. So I think you need to get help for the areas that need improving, but I also think diet is one of them. You know, like, where does somebody start? Well, I was shocked because I'm so naive. I just figure if you're joining my ultimate weight loss program, you also want to get healthy. I was shocked to find out how many people in the program are currently drinking alcohol to excess, smoking, and vaping pot. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer that you kind of fix those habits first before you even bother. I don't want to say bother, but before you eat a health promoting diet. So I think you almost have to triage your life in a way. And, you know, because to me, if you're smoking and drinking every day, it almost doesn't matter what you eat. And if you come to my program, then you're doing it to lose weight, and you're not really caring about healthy. So I think people need to get healthy. And for some of them, it might be dealing with the emotional stuff first. But, you know, we talked about this yesterday, is that, I think that when people have a lot of stuff going on emotionally, that makes them more vulnerable to having food addictions or wanting to overeat or eat, you know, hyper palatable food.
Right.
But that's not the reason. And I think they do themselves a disservice if they say, well, you know, I'm an emotional eater, there's nothing I can do about it because I have these emotional problems. You can, you know, Sigmund Freud could come back right now and talk to you, and you'd probably still be overweight until you adopt the proper diet. So what I mean is, it's not an either or, it's an and also. You know what I'm saying? So don't use your past traumas and current dramas as a reason not to eat better. It may make it more difficult. That's true, but that doesn't mean you can't do it, because just because something's difficult doesn't mean you can't do it. Most people have done difficult things in their life, maybe not in this area, but if they think about successes they've had in other areas, if they apply some of the same principles, committing to it, being consistent, getting a community to support them, they can do this. And by the way, you know, I read something, or maybe Doug Lyle said, that people that quit smoking generally don't do it till like the 8th try. Well, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful at this the first time, but you got to just keep plugging along and just keep, you know, just eat more vegetables, try a new fruit, do something, because you can't do everything. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything, but people that tend to suffer with addictions or food addictions, they tend to be kind of all or nothing people. They're either on the program or they're off the program. Well, that's fine. If you're off the program, then you just get back on the program. It's tough. You know, I don't even know how I got in this line of work. I'll tell you, because it drives me crazy, because it's like, I get to like, just do it. What's wrong with you? You can do it, you know?
But you look at your story and you were set up perfectly to do this work, right? Because you've lived this experience. And I think, you know, the message that you give, I think is really powerful, because it tells people that regardless of where you're at now, some people might say it's a tough approach or a tough love approach. I think it's a very realistic approach, in the sense of saying, regardless of where you're at today, you are still powerful. You still have choices. And once we're empowered to look at our choices and say, you know, what's the choice I'm going to make at my next meal? Or, yeah, if I do struggle with, you know, some of these things we've mentioned, marital problems, anxiety, depression, what are the choices that I have within my power in terms of how I can respond to that? Now, do you think, and this is a topic that we talked about yesterday, I want to bring it now on the Facebook broadcast, but where do you weigh in then on no pun intended, on emotional eating? Like the idea that you've already answered this kind of, but I want to put it right back together. Is there such a thing as emotional eating? I know that's something that I've heard you talk about.
So I always thought, this is so funny, because I always was sure there was. And I always figured that's why I was fat, because I was an emotional eater. There was a lot of trauma and abuse in my house. And I felt bad. And so I would eat the cookies. And then one day, Dr. Lyle said, well, is that the only time you ate the cookies? I'm like, no, I ate them all the time. They were really good. And he tried to explain to me, because he was a statistics professor. Actually, there's a video on my YouTube page where I interview him on this, where he says there's no such thing as emotional eating, only excuse eating. But he tried to explain, because he was a statistics professor.
I remember seeing that, yeah.
That there's really no more incidents of people that were like raped or had trauma that suffered than people that didn't. But it's very easy to make don't want to say the mistake, because I'm not diminishing what happened to people or their feelings, because I know they really believe it. But the truth is like, to give you an example, I have a friend that was in the concentration camps, and I can't imagine, I mean, I can't even, no matter what I went through, I can't imagine anything worse in life than that horror of living in the concentration camp, seeing your families tortured and killed, right? I mean, that's just, to me, I can't. And yet he's not overweight and he's not an emotional eater. Now, it would make sense. Shouldn't he have like a drug or alcohol problem or something, because he went through he was starved and had to witness all these things? No, he doesn't. And so the thing is it's really easy to, I think that when you have past childhood trauma or even current stress right now, I think it makes you more vulnerable to want to use a substance to feel better, whether that substance is food or alcohol or recreational or prescription drugs. I think it primes the pump. There's an old saying in plant-based nutrition from Dr. Campbell and the China study that genetics loads the gun, diet and lifestyle pulls the trigger. So I think that if you have emotional problems or past trauma, I think it makes you more vulnerable to this, but I don't think it's the reason that it's the food. It's the food. It's the food. It's the food. But when you eat kale, you're not going to get high like you are if you eat this. So I think they're connected, but I don't think it's a direct cause and effect relationship.
Okay, so that's the key point, I think, that, because I'll tell you, when I heard the interview with Dr. Lyle, I emailed Sharon and I had all these thoughts, and because in a lot of ways I was like, no, that emotional eating is real. And I think the more that I hear you explain it, the more I really do understand where you're coming from, and I see a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think what you're basically saying is that, again, there's these components that we've ignored, and I think a lot of people have ignored in terms of what the pleasure trap talks so well about, in terms of, what food actually does to the brain and how it impacts dopamine and how it impacts the pleasure part of the brain. And I think pairing that now with this other thing that says, if I know that I'm going home to an emotionally abusive household, we'll use that, or if I know I'm going home to lots of high levels of stress, or I know I'm going to a job with high levels of stress, again, like you said, it primes the pump, but it's only going to make it like my brain goes to a point where I might want to pull the dopamine lever if I can. But couldn't we argue that you could do that with, like you mentioned, vaping, smoking pot, drugs, alcohol, that really, in that way, food is just kind of something that someone would use to change their biochemical state. But
absolutely,
yeah,
because people do not. You're so right, Dr. Mondo. Because when people are feeling these emotional experiences, they don't say, "Oh my God, if I don't have some broccoli slaw right now, I'm going to die."
Right.
Because Dr. Lyle says that people don't eat for emotional reasons; they take drugs for emotional reasons, and the foods that people eat for emotional reasons are the foods that are more drug-like than food-like. The high-fat, high-calorie, sugary, floury, oily foods.
So what are some of those foods? Because I know people are probably going to wonder that. Like, would pizza, would burgers,
anything that's high fat and high calories.
Okay, high fat, high calories fits into it. Okay.
And it's not things that take a long time to eat either. When people medicate with food, it's usually things that can go in pretty quickly. They're not going to eat artichokes. It's going to be, Cinnabon, donuts, cookies, cakes, things that can hand-to-mouth foods where they can get that high really, really quickly, and that's not to say that there are people that don't overeat on some whole natural food, but you just don't get the same kind of high from it, and it gets, try chewing through a pound of celery. You get bored pretty quickly,
So in your work then with the True North and your work in the program, is it vital then? I mean, in that way, it's sometimes there's this belief that all of like the truth out there is being packaged and told in different ways that resonate with different people. Like, in a lot of ways, this truth is still resonating with the truth that I believe and is it important for people to get that? Like, do people, in order to really be successful at some point, need to realize that, okay, don't own this idea of being an emotional eater as much. Don't make that part of your story, but instead realize you need to understand the science behind what the high, calorie dense food is doing to your brain. Do people have to understand that in order to make it in a stressful, emotional environment?
So, it depends, because I think knowledge is power. And I think sometimes when you understand it, it helps. But I got to tell you, Dr. Mondo, there's some people I know in our program that are some of the smartest people that could quote the science better than the doctors, but they're still not doing it. So, at the end of the day, action is probably more important than knowledge. It's funny because one of the things that's really interesting is if people go to the True North Health Center, and they don't even have to fast, they go and they become what's known as an unrestricted feeder, where they just eat the whole natural food, 3 meals a day, buffets, all you can eat. Doesn't matter what their past was. It doesn't matter what their marriage is. It doesn't matter what all their emotional problems are. They've had over 30,000 patients in every single one that needed to lose weight, lost weight. There are people that are thin that go there for different conditions, and maybe they don't need to lose weight. And so that's where you realize that even no matter what's going on with you emotionally, when you get the food right, you can fix what's going on with you physiologically. But when there's a lot of stuff going on emotionally, it's sometimes harder to do that. That said, I have some clients that don't seem to have any emotional problems. They're very, very wealthy. They have what we would consider charmed, perfect lives, and they can fall victim just as much to the pleasure trap, even without these emotional problems. Right. And so, Dr. Lau would say, like, if I put you in a prison in Cuba and fed you nothing but beans and rice, you would get thin, regardless of everything else. And he's right. People underestimate the pull of the pleasure trap and the power of these foods. And people are using them as drugs instead of food. And so that's where I think where the emotional eating comes in. People that smoke, the people that smoke, it's a habit, it's an addiction. They smoke X number of cigarettes a day, whatever. I don't know if it's on schedule, but they might have upsetting news, and then they might light up. But they don't go outside and say, you know what, I'm emotionally smoking right now. They're smoking because they're addicted to cigarettes, just like people that medicate with these foods are addicted to the sugar and the flour.
But they're pulling the lever. Yeah, they're pulling the lever of dopamine, right?
Right. So it's just that, I feel bad. It's normal, by the way, to want to feel good. You're completely normal for wanting to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. But what's happened is these highly processed foods, which are more drug-like than food-like, give you such a huge hit of dopamine for such a large amount of calories that you do get. It's not the same as, like, obviously heroin addiction. I mean, it's easier, I think, to quit. I mean, some people would say it's harder. I don't know. I've never had that kind of drug addiction, but it's so socially acceptable and easily affordable and readily available, and people are doing it not even realizing that they are medicating. It's interesting. I was at Whole Foods today doing my shopping, and there was a kid there, and I'm guessing he was 4 or 5. I'm not really good with kid ages, but the kid was having a tantrum, and his mother was being very calm, and I didn't know exactly what she was saying. Throughout my whole shopping experience, 20 minutes, this kid just was screaming as if like somebody was torturing him. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? I'm so glad I didn't have kids. Well, finally, the mother
and I'm having nightmares, but yeah.
The mother got, this was Whole Foods, so they don't sell the crap of craps, but they still sell things with sugar. She got, I think it's called Justin's. It was like a chocolate peanut butter cup. It was candy. And she gave it to the kid, and the kid calmed down. Yeah. The kid didn't even start eating it yet, but apparently, that's what it was about. They were in a store. It was 2:00. Maybe the kid was hungry, and I guess maybe she said, you can have an apple. No, I didn't hear the whole thing, but the minute she handed him this chocolate peanut butter cup, even before he ate it, he calmed down. And I'm thinking, this is just exactly what I'm trying to show people. These are drug-like foods. I call them drugs because, when you think about it, sugar and flour, they go through the same refining process as drugs and alcohol. They're not quite as addictive. I mean, people don't generally get behind the car after having, sourdough bread and kill people. But it's very similar to the brains of people that are vulnerable. And some people aren't vulnerable. There are people like my husband that can eat bread and can eat sugar, and he doesn't eat a lot of it, and he stays thin, and it doesn't make him crazy. But those of us that are overweight or that suffer with these food addictions, just even a little bit just gets us. I mean, it makes us want more and more and more and more, and we can't stop. These foods have a highly addictive nature to a large part of the population.
Do you think that some people, and this is what we'll talk about us, like, 'cause I look at myself and I look at my story with, I can relate a lot to your story too, growing up overweight and struggling. Like, do you think that our brains, in some ways, some of us that are set up, or that we, like the genetics load the gun, that some of us just have kind of like more of these obsessive tendencies and, like you said, all or nothing tendencies. And so if you put us in front of these drugs, then we go, yeah, I want more of that. I want to do it again.
I absolutely think that genetics plays a huge role in this, and that I think those of us that come from families where there is addiction, you know, my mother was morbidly obese.
Yeah.
I have alcoholism in my family.
Me
I have
too. Yeah.
all kinds of things like that. I mean, I've never drank, thank God. So I think that, like, again, it primes the pump. I think we are more genetically more susceptible. Like, here's the thing. I mean, if you force somebody to have alcohol, like, they would become alcoholic eventually, probably. But nobody has ever become an alcoholic in an environment where there's been no alcohol. And nobody's ever stayed an alcoholic in an environment where there's no alcohol. Do you see what I'm saying? So in other words, if you've never had that first drink, you don't crave alcohol. And, you know, people say, well, you know, I'm doomed because both my parents were an alcoholic and I have that gene. Again, genetics loads the gun. If you chose to never take that first drink, regardless of your genetics, you wouldn't be alcoholic. So some of us have more of this in our genes, and the behavior has been modeled. Like, if our parents ate this way, you know, we learn that that's what people eat. And so I think that some of us just genetically are, like you say, more vulnerable, more susceptible to these addictions. There's something, you know, there's these genes, the DRD2 gene. Some people have what's called low dopamine receptivity, which means that even when they eat the same amount of food as somebody else, they don't produce as much dopamine. So they need more. But the thing is you can retrain your brain. I mean, that's why exercise, I mean, listen, if you knew me, like, this is hilarious. I mean, I did everything in my life till I was 52 to avoid exercise. And yes, one of your viewers said you don't have to drink to live, but you need to eat to live. And you're right. And that's why this can be so important.
Yes.
I mean, I don't love exercise, but I love the effect of exercise, and I dislike the effect of not exercising. Whatever your brain chemistry is lacking, you don't necessarily need to take an antidepressant. You need to get out in the sun and take a walk every day, and you need to move your body, because when you do that, all those feel-good things that went on in here from eating the crap food, you can get that. You can get that from social connectivity and volunteer work and sex and other ways too. But like I say, it's so easy to get it from food. You know, 7-Eleven, you know, open 24 hours. You know, hospital parking lots have vending machines. It's pet stores, hardware stores. You know, this crap is insidious. Like I said, on the airplane. Oh my God. I mean, come on. You really think I'm gonna die? I mean, this is the food I got. I mean, this is, what did we say? This was 700, 400. So this is about 1,200 calories. Like, did I really? I mean, I took it just because I thought this would make a cute prop someday. But do you think that I would need this? Like, I'm going to die without this? And by the way, I could have 3 pounds of sweet potatoes for less calories than what's in my hand right here that I got on the airplane yesterday. You know. And that doesn't even count the sodas that they were trying to give me, you know? It's crazy. Yeah,
it is crazy. And, you know, I think one of the things that comes through as I listen to your story, Chef AJ, is empowerment. Like, you ooze empowerment to people. Like, there's so many people right now that are probably, you know, watching, tuning in, that are feeling empowered by listening to your approach, because we can put self-imposed limits on ourselves in certain ways, right? Like, we can put ideas into our head that we can't do certain things. And there was a point in your life where you had some of those self-imposed limits too. I'll never be someone that can exercise. I'll never be like, what are some of the things that you're doing today that if you were back in that initial photo, right, you know, like 30 years ago, that you would have said, no effing, like, no way I'm going to do that. Like, there's no way. Like, exercise is one of them. Like, what are some things you're doing now that, you know, your 25, 30-year-old self would be like, there's absolutely no way. Don't bet any money on that, because that's not happening.
Let me think. Well, one of the things, well, here. Well, exercise is a huge one, though, because I'm not just exercising. I'm doing 3 90-minute spin classes a week, and that's just crazy.
So again, you would have never anticipated that. Like, again, that would have seemed crazy.
I mean, I'm doing one thing I always wanted to do. I'm painting. I mean, it's not the best painting, but I like it.
Awesome.
So awesome. The other thing I'm doing is, this is one thing, is because I remember when I was, you know, trying to be an actress back then, they're like, well, you know, you're too fat. You know, all you can do is be like the best friend. You know, you could never get like a leading part or anything. So I'm back in classes. I'm not trying to be an actress now, but I'm taking improvisational comedy every week. And
you're doing improv? Really? Oh my God.
I love it.
When you come up here, we need to do an improv class together. We'll talk about that.
you know, maybe when we're at that party together, we could like just do a couple of like exercises.
Please. Oh, I'm
trying to get
that's
Sharon
happening.
to take improv because it makes you a better speaker. Because like, for
Yes.
example, I was speaking at the Veg Fest on Sunday outdoors, which is kind of weird anyway, doing a PowerPoint outdoors. And it started
PowerPoint outdoors.
to rain.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
true. And it's
And
okay.
so like, and so having improv skills, you know, you're able to like adapt to these changes that happen. So, you know, just doing stuff, you know, that I probably wouldn't do because I didn't have the confidence or, yeah, I mean, I'm it's like, it's almost like I have a new life, you know?
No, and I don't think I think remove the word almost. You do have a new life.
Yeah,
And it's absolutely amazing. How often do you reflect on that? Do you ever just sit back and kind of, because you got so much going on, but is there ever a time when you just stop and kind of think back to where you came from? Yeah.
I try. I don't do this every night, but before I go to sleep, I try to like think about what I'm grateful for and think about at least 3 things. And I do try to do that. I love that you use the word empowerment though, because that's really what I want to give people, especially women who feel so disempowered because of their weight and because of their circumstances, because it drives me crazy when women feel like they can't do, or people in general, but women in particular, because they've taken on this role in their family where they're the nurturer and the caregiver, and they don't know how to crawl out because they're with husbands and children that want to keep eating crap and eat addictive and poisonous food. And I would love women to feel empowered, and however it would take them to raise their self-esteem, that's what I really want for people, because I want them to feel better. And I know that if they're overweight, in an overweight body, they're not feeling as good as they could. And it really is about, you know, when you do things that make you feel good, it results in looking good. So it's not the other way around. I was trying to get over my food addiction, specifically my sugar addiction, even before I was trying to lose weight. But once I dealt with the addiction part, the weight part took care of itself. You know, most people are looking just to lose weight, but they don't really want to change what they're eating. They maybe want to eat less of it, but that's not going to be sustainable. Right.
Do you feel like when you mention some of those pieces of the personality that you're empowering women around now, which of those parts do you connect with? Like when you hear different people's stories in your weight loss community, what parts do you just go, oh my God? Because I know, like for me, there's some when I hear like the latchkey kid stuff, or you know, like or just, you know, or anything, you know, panic attacks, anxiety, like that stuff I struggle with, so it pulls on my heartstrings.
Oh yeah, I had full blown panic disorder. I'm a panic person in recovery.
I didn't know
just
that.
Want to point out that Sharon said I'm meditating now too. I never would have told you 30 years ago that I'd be meditating every day. It's always, and I still sometimes think, what a colossal waste of time. I'm just sitting here doing nothing. But
yeah, I know, right? The achiever wouldn't let that go. Yeah, but so you struggled with the panic stuff though too. That was one of them.
Yeah. And I sometimes still have panic attacks. I'm doing really well, but I did have that for a while, and that's the subject of my book Unprocessed. I didn't leave my house for an entire year. So I get it. It's like I you know, watch my guys. Watch that 45-minute YouTube from fat vegan to skinny bitch, and you will know everything you want to know. You know, one of the things that I try to connect with women, and because it drives me crazy, women are notorious people pleasers. And I once heard a saying, nice girls finish. Sorry about that.
You said you once heard a saying that nice girls
finish fat. Nice girls finish fat. And I want to empower women to not be so nice. And by that I don't mean, you know, you don't have to be a bitch, but I got to tell you, I have created an acronym for the word bitch, BITCH. And to me, bitch simply means babe is taking care of herself, BITCH. Because I want women to do what's good for them instead of always putting themselves last. And it seems almost that the more overweight the person, the more they are going to be people pleasing, you know, that the more overweight they are, the more that they put themselves last. And I want them to not do that, because it is empowering when you learn how to say no to people. It doesn't mean you have to say, you know, you don't have to be mean about it, but you'll notice that the people that really seem to do better with this whole weight loss food journey are ones, because you have to learn to say no, because you're in an environment where people are gonna, I made it just for you, aren't you gonna have a bite? And so whether they do it for weight loss or other areas, I want women to have permission to learn to say no, to take care of themselves and stop putting themselves last. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons they eat, is because they give, all day to everybody else. You can't give from an empty
Amen.
cup. So what do they have left? Late at night, they stuff themselves because they haven't nurtured
That's
themselves
the
at
me
all
time. Yeah.
day.
Yeah, that's the me time. Yeah, I think, one thing I'll say too, and this is what we've seen in the last, 10, 15 years. And again, there's some projection happening here because I'm a man and I relate to some of this stuff, but I see these characteristics of the people pleasing, the overachieving, the inability to set boundaries and really stand up for yourself or stand up for your convictions, being, adverse to conflict. I think those are things that really I think a lot of men are struggling with that stuff too. I think it's part of now this increasingly common overweight experience. And so, again, as you mentioned, though, you're absolutely right. There's stages where you're going to be tested in terms of, anytime that someone changes, even in an alcoholic family system, if someone gets sober that you wanted to get sober, everyone in the family system is thrown out of whack. Like there's role confusion. No one knows what to do. So we all protest change, even good change. And I see this happen all the time when people lose weight, that people in the family are all of a sudden protesting by doing that testing. And I've experienced it too and these are loving family and friends, but they're putting you in these uncomfortable situations. And if you are not ready to stand up and set boundaries for yourself in those ways, then you will find time and again, if the people pleasing takes over, that could be a huge downhill spiral that leads to, have you seen some people, even through like one family event or one holidays, how many folks have you seen, one of those situations where they've been in where they haven't been empowered, all of a sudden it leads to this landslide of more and more events where they spiral out of control. I'm sure you've seen that.
Absolutely, and you're so right about that. The family, it is a system, and it reminds me of an analogy that a reverend, a local minister named O.C. Smith, who wrote the song or sang the song "God Didn't Make Little Green Apples," he used to say that when crabs were caught in a bucket, that every now and then a crab would be smart enough to figure out if he crawled on the other crabs, he could get to the top of the bucket and escape to his freedom. But all the other crabs in the bucket would pull him down to his certain death.
Yes.
And I hate to say that your family and friends are like crabs, but they are. And it has to do with all kinds of stuff that's beyond my scope and understanding because I'm not a psychologist. It has to do with status because if a family is unhealthy together, they feel good about it. It's kind of like the misery loves company. But if you get slender and they're still overweight and you overcome your addictions and they stay addicted, well, now you're better than them. That's how it's perceived. Their status has gone down. And so it can be tough, especially in a marital relationship. But we see a lot of husbands and wives where they're both obese and the wife gets slimmer, but the husband's not on board and he completely freaks out because guess what? Now she's attractive to a whole bunch of other men too,
Yep.
It is complicated. That's why if you live alone, you should be able to do this. You have
if you live alone, come on, what excuses? Really though, at the end of the day, but these are all things again, and that's what I think you probably are on board with this, but that's why I always say, in order to really be successful, this has to be bigger than weight loss. It has to be about rewriting your story. It has to be about really taking a look at all those areas of your life and doing like what you've done, which is, you certainly, I'm hearing food has been the key, one of the key mechanisms, if not the key mechanism in your empowerment story, but you've really set out to not just say, oh, I want to live longer, or I want to, I want to be thin. You've really set out to just live an entirely different life. And I think people need to know that when they're going into this sort of transformation process, that it's not just about weight loss. In fact, I think that's part of the reason why people struggle so much is because they're so focused on just the weight loss part. I think if you could focus on the different measurables, like we're talking about, the different personality changes that you want to see, the way you show up in the world, the way your relationships look, the way you set boundaries, the way that you live empowered, if those become the areas that you focus on, it's almost like the other stuff with the food, and it can fall into place when you use the right approaches, as I think you probably would put as a caveat to that.
Yeah, I agree with you about writing the story. When we have a program called the Ultimate Weight Loss Mastery Program, and one of the exercises the participants do when they first join is they write the story up until that day, specifically as it pertained to food and eating and weight and things like that. And I'm a big believer in a line that was in a movie. I think it was called the what's it called? The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. It was a movie. And the guy said, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. And I believe you can completely rewrite your story, that it really doesn't matter what has happened to you up until this moment. You are the sole author of your autobiography, and you can change it. You can't change what happened in the past. You can learn from it, like that old saying, turn a bad day into good data, but you get to write the ending. And that's what's so exciting about creating your life. And like you say, if you think about it more, not just weight loss, the weight loss is a result of something being out of balance. If you're overweight, eating the wrong food, and once you get in balance and figure out that your life is out of balance, I mean, look, when you're just eating sugar all day and sitting on your butt, that's out of balance, and so when you're willing to change a few things, and again, but it's hard because I really believe that these processed foods, these sugars and flours, and then people are drinking alcohol and coke and caffeine and all that stuff, it really does give you a brain that, I don't want to say brain damage like somebody that had an accident, but it really, your brain does not function optimally on these food-like drugs. And it makes it very hard to make good decisions and get out of bed and exercise and, do volunteer work and all those things. You basically are in the cycle of just getting enough of the drugs so that you can just tolerate, not feeling so bad that you can't go to work and things like that. And until people get out of this loop, they don't realize, and they don't realize how good they can feel, and they don't realize how bad that they felt until they feel better. It's quite interesting.
That's a powerful statement. They don't realize how bad they felt until they feel better. Isn't that amazing how we can do that, right? Like, and I see that a lot. I've experienced it myself too, but I see that a lot in folks that I work with, that you could be in the middle of that darkness and that hole, and you really just feel like the ability to feel anything but that is just impossible. And then when you're outside of it, it's so hard to even resonate with the previous feelings. When you were in that year that you mentioned of experiencing the panic and staying in your house, like how did you make sense of what was the impetus of that? Was that all just food choices that led to those places?
No, I had lost the baby, and I basically short circuited, and I just said, and that's why I really do empathize with people that have had bad stuff. But you know what, guys, we all have bad shit all the time. I mean, it's just a question of when and how much. I don't think anybody, has like these perfect lives, either past, present, or future. But that's why it's not what happens to you, it's your response to what happens. And, one of the best books I think people can read, especially if they feel disempowered, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
You know what's so incredible? Oh my gosh. There's an app called Blinkist, I think it's called. And it's where you can just like read a book in like 10, 12 minutes. It gives you the highlights. It's not the greatest way to read a book, but that's one of my favorite books. And I thought about it earlier when you were mentioning your friend at the concentration camp. And last night, as I was falling asleep, I just was reading that on Blink to just remember some of the pieces. And it's funny, I'm thinking about that a lot as you're talking. So that's pretty incredible. But yeah, keep going with that. It's amazing. I just was reading that last night.
Yeah, now Sherry says she lives alone and still struggles with cravings, but if this is the same Sherry, she told me her daughter lives with her and has mint M&Ms in the house. And so again, if there's food in the environment, you're always going to have cravings. But yeah, so Viktor Frankl, like if I could meet anybody in the world, probably it would have, there's a few, but Nathan Pritikin is one of them. He's one person because he had the horror of all horrors happen to him. His fiance, his parents were, and he made the most out of the worst situation. It's sort of like that movie Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni. He won an Oscar for that. It's a comedy in a concentration camp, as weird as it sounds. But I do try to think of like that when I'm experiencing something, I always think it's like the worst thing that ever happened because it's happening to me right now. But then I step back in perspective, and I think that there's, a lot of the stuff that I make a big deal about are really what first world problems, I've had a toothache and it's like, and I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing. And then I think, you know what? There's people in other countries that are having their hands blown off because of the landmines from a war a long time ago that don't even have the privilege to go to a dentist, So I try to put things in perspective, but I still sometimes act like a little Jewish American princess, I'll be honest.
Yeah, but that seems like something that is a tool for you that people, again, this goes back to this empowerment piece.
Yeah, you know what really helps actually, and this is interesting because even when I had panic disorder and really didn't leave my house for a year and pretty much lost our house because I couldn't work, and I still, this is, and now that I think about it, I did leave once a week. And what I did is I went to volunteer at the Braille Institute because I figured, you know, as bad as I was, I wanted to try to help people that were even less fortunate, because to me, being blind is, I mean, these people are wonderful, by the way, and they do wonderfully. But for me, especially being an anxious person, I can't imagine not having my sight. You know, I'm scared most of the time, and I can see. And so I remember volunteering, and I tell you, it's one of the things I've kept up most of my life is doing volunteer work, and I still do it. I volunteer at a cancer hospital with my dog, and it puts life in perspective, because when I have to like bitch about the fact that I got a flat tire and I had to buy a new tire for $125, then I go and see somebody that's getting a $100,000 infusion of chemotherapy. You know, it makes it seem like, oh, well, this is really not that big of a deal, you know?
Wow. Yeah, it's that perspective, like you said, of paying it forward, stepping outside of yourself. And these are like the themes that you seem to do so well, is like stepping outside of just that problem saturated tunnel vision we can get. And we can get lost in that. It's amazing though, to me, that was the one, like, out of all things that you would leave to do, like, it's pretty incredible. If you would have given me like a guess on that, I would have said you left your house once a week to go to Taco Bell. Like, I can't believe that you actually
No,
left the house
I
to
really
go, wow.
did, because I don't know why. There was something in me driven from my grandfather, who was a doctor but still did volunteer work, that it's like, this is just what you do. You know, my partner John Pierre said it's the rent it's the rent for the privilege of living on earth. And there have been times in my life where I didn't, but for the most part, I just, like, I actually feel guilty when I miss a shift. It's like, you know, and there's nobody monitoring me, but there is something very, like, you know, it's like exercise. I never want to go to the gym, but when I'm out of the gym, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I went. And I never want to go to my shift, but when I'm done, there's always something that happens there where somebody is touched, moved, or inspired by the fact that I had this interaction with my dog. And it's just, that's the best feeling in the world, is to make somebody else feel better, really. And the thing is when people are living a life because of addiction, whether it's food or drugs, they're not able to participate in the world in this way. And it's like they're not living their full life.
Yeah, you know? Our guest last week, Anthony Macelio, who I'm sure you're familiar with, said that was his big thing. His why was to get off the sidelines, and that really stuck with me. Like you said, there's so many people that are living right now limited lives on the sidelines, and so much of it can be transformed by transforming their health to get back in the game, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I know there's a lot of questions in, and I know we've gone a little bit over as it is, which I could continue to keep going and going. Is there any questions that you see on screen? I'm going to grab my monitor here, but is there any questions that you've seen on screen that you wanted to address?
Right now, let's see. I see Sharon's there. Yeah, let's see.
I
see a lot of comments. I'm not seeing any questions.
I know, and that's usually what happens. I see Sherry said, now that I think of it, she does leave her junk in the house. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sue says, how I cook the zucchini in the air fryer. I just slice it in either halves or thirds. I do about 30 minutes at 400, maybe a little longer, till it really, I don't put anything on it. It's delicious. Chris says kale is heaven. Yep. Nope. Brenda says no sugar craving since plant-based. Let's see. I'm not really seeing any questions.
One thing that stands out to me, Laura says, the pleasure trap theory takes shame out of overeating. That is empowering. I like that.
Absolutely. The food is causing you to overeat because it's artificially stimulating the production of dopamine in your brain. It's fooling your brain's satiety mechanisms. And so when you understand that, like, if you eat the right diet, you're really not going to overeat, not to the degree that you are eating unnatural foods. Yeah, it is the food. It's the food. It's the food. It's the food. If you ever watch that show, My 600-Pound Life, you notice that none of them are ever eating a single fruit or vegetable, you know? It's the food.
It's the food. And, you know, I think bringing this back all the way around. So if someone comes to you and says, okay, Chef AJ, I got all this stuff in my life that I need to change. I know that, you know, I heard your talk on the Dr. Mondo show, and I heard you say about being a people pleaser. That's me. You know, an overachiever, but this one area of your life you can't fix, that's me. I got marital stuff going on. Hey, panic attacks, I've had that too. again, I want to help people really understand this from your perspective and your story. For you, the first part would really be outside of the addiction stuff to drugs and alcohol. You would say, get this food under control. And once you do what? Once you do, you'll be empowered to rewrite the other areas of your life and address those, or?
I think when you have the calm brain, the stable brain that comes with getting off these drug-like foods, it makes it easier to tackle some of these other issues. That said, if you need to see somebody psychologically, you know, a doctor like Dr. Mondo or Dr. Lyle, or, you know, like even a pastor, you should do that too. It's not an either or. You do them both, right?
I like that.
But
yeah.
I think when you you know, again, it's like if you're an alcoholic, it's going to be really hard to make good decisions when you're drunk all the time. And it's the same thing when you're under the influence of these processed foods. It's really hard to live your best life and deal with the problem. You know, so again, it becomes circular. It's like, you know, can't get a job on Broadway till I have a job on Broadway. Well, I can't get help for my food problem till I solve these other problems. Never going to happen, you know. So Sue says cholesterol so high, doctor wants me to take shots. So what I recommend is a free consult with Dr. Alan Goldhammer. If you go to the True North website, healthcommunity.com, you can get a free consult. And then they also have paid consults with the medical doctors there. But I don't know where Sue lives, but you could go to True North in person if you live anywhere near Santa Rosa and see a really good plant-based doctor there. Or go to Dr. McDougall's website. You can do this with the food. You don't have to take the medicine, at least not right away, without giving it at least a good 30 days doing it with the food. Most people don't have to take cholesterol lowering drugs if they are on the proper diet. Oh, Louisiana. Okay, I don't know what, and you know, there's a website, vegdocs.com. I don't know if there's a doctor in Louisiana, but you can do everything online or through the phone with True North. And
that's awesome. Yeah, great info. And I'm just kind of sitting with what you shared, and yeah, it resonates with me. It does. I think that, like you said, you need the calm brain. You know, it's kind of what I took from you. You need to be in that calm space. And again, we go back to empowerment and choices. This is one area where you have choices. Maybe, you know, you don't have choices for how other people in your family decide to operate. And we see that a lot with people when they make health changes. You can't control if your overweight family members want to get on board with what you're doing. But the things you can control are your own choices, right? So I think it's a great place to start, is putting your health and putting, like you said, your brain in the best possible position to be calm and finding that balance to then start tackling the other aspects of life. And then with that said, it's not this either or, because two things can exist. Like, you can tackle that food thing and get yourself to that calm, balanced state, but you might still have other stuff to work on. And that's where I think, you know, what I'm hearing in your message too is that there shouldn't be shame about reaching out for support for that as well.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm proud to say I see Dr. Lyle. I mean, I don't see him. We work on the phone, but I mean, I go almost every week. I mean, I find it also I mean, if you find the right.
Oh no, did we lose our audio connection? Let me see if we can get Chef AJ back on here. Well, I'm not sure what happened with our connection. Oh man, that was just in the middle of a great point that Chef AJ was making. But we're going to see if we can get her back on camera. But if not, what I do want to just say is amazing. This video broadcast will be available to rewatch. I know some people have been asking about that. All of the episodes that we have of Rewriting My Story are available to watch after we complete the episode. So you can definitely take a look at this one, and you don't want to miss it. There's so much great stuff in here. You know, Chef AJ on this broadcast shares more than just her story. She also shares a lot of her incredible wealth of knowledge. And so again, definitely go and check that out. I'll try to see if we can get her back on the air, but if not, I want to just give a big thanks to Chef AJ for joining us tonight, taking the time to tell her story, taking the time to share her message of empowerment. That is the word that I'm going to think about when I think of Chef AJ, is this belief that we can change, this belief that it can happen today. And, it makes me, as I'm reflecting on her story in this interview, it makes me more emboldened to encourage people and make sure and ask myself, am I empowering people in that sort of passionate way? Because I do think a lot of times when people come to us, when they're needing to change and they know they want to make the change, that we really are the placeholders for them to have that initial burst of empowerment, that initial burst of energy, that initial burst of hope and inspiration. And I think that's something that Chef AJ just does so well. It's this fact in her brain that she knows that everyone can experience rewriting their story. It's not just reserved for some people, that if everyone is willing to really educate themselves and to make specific and intentional choices, that they can experience the same sort of life that she has. And so just absolutely amazing. Again, I'm going to give it one more shot, but if I can't get Chef AJ back on, then I'm going to tell you about really quickly is you guys can watch next week as I interview Tim Kaufman. He has a great website called fatmanrants.com. Tim has an amazing transformation story. I'm just, again, the guests that we've had on this program, it's really impacted me. I know I get tons of positive feedback from you guys, sharing how amazing the guests have been for you and how much they're speaking your language and they're inspiring you. But I'll tell you what, these interviews last, and they kind of have a lasting effect that stays with me personally throughout the week. And it's encouraging me to want to do more and more to help folks. And so I'm so excited to have Chef AJ tonight, and then again, Tim Kaufman the following week. And so let's give Chef AJ one more chance. And if not, I will see all of you guys next week, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will jump back into rewriting my story. And let's see if we can give Chef AJ one more try. If not, I'll see you guys next week. All right, everyone. Thank you guys so much. It looks like it will be back next week. We'll see you with Tim Kaufman next week. This is Dr. Mondo signing off.